Chapter 5. Knowledge, Self-Elements. I must now go with somewhat of detail into the special subject in which these general truths will be exhibited. Everything I have to say would be conceived much more clearly by a very little practical manipulation. But here I want to put the subject in as general a light as possible, so that there may be no hindrance to the judgment of the reader. And when I use the word know, I assume something else than the possession of a rule, by which it can be said how facts are. By knowing I mean that the facts of a subject all he in the mind ready to come out vividly into consciousness when the attention is directed on them. Michelangelo knew the human frame. He could tell every little fact about it. If he chose to call up the image, he would see mentally how each muscle and fold of the skin lay with regard to the surrounding parts. We want to obtain a knowledge as good as Michelangelo's. There is a great difference between Michelangelo and us, but let that difference be expressed, not in our way of knowing, but in the difference between the things he knew and the things we know. We take a very simple structure and know it as absolutely as he knew the complicated structure of the human body. And let us take a block of cubes, any number will do, but for convenience sake let us take a set of 27 cubes put together so as to form a large cube of 27 parts. And let each of these cubes be marked so as to be recognized, and let each have a name so that it can be referred to. And let us suppose that we have learnt this block of cubes so that each one is known, that is to say, its position in the block is known and its relation to the other blocks. Now having obtained this knowledge of the block as it stands in front of us, let us ask ourselves if there is any self-element present in our knowledge of it. And there is obviously this self-element present. We have learnt the cubes as they stand in accordance with our own convenience in putting them up. We put the lowest ones first, and the others on the top of them, and we distinctly conceive the lower ones as supporting the upper ones. Now this fact of support has nothing to do with the block of cubes itself. It depends on the conditions under which we come to apprehend the block of cubes. It depends on our position on the surface of the earth, whereby gravity is an all-important factor in our experience. In fact, our sight has got so accustomed to take gravity into consideration in its view of things, that when we look at a landscape or object with our head upside down we do not see it inverted, but we superinduce on the direct sense impressions our knowledge of the action of gravity, and obtain a view differing very little from what we see when in an upright position. It will be found that every fact about the cubes has involved in it a reference to up and down. It is by being above or below that we chiefly remember where the cubes are. But above and below is a relation which depends simply on gravity. If it were not for gravity, above and below would be interchangeable terms, instead of expressing a difference of marked importance to us under our conditions of existence. Now we put being above or being below into the cubes themselves and feel it a quality in them. It defines their position. But this above or below really comes from the conditions in which we are. It is a self-element, and as such, to obtain a true knowledge of the cubes we must get rid of it. And now, for the sake of a process which will be explained afterwards, let us suppose that we cannot move the block of cubes which we have put up. Let us keep it fixed. In order to learn how it is independent of gravity, the best way would be to go to a place where gravity has virtually ceased to act, at the center of the earth, for instance, or in a freely falling shell. But this is impossible, so we must choose another way. Let us, then, since we cannot get rid of gravity, see what we have done already. We have learnt the cubes, and however they are learnt, it will be found that there is a certain set of them round which the others are mentally grouped as being on the right or left, above or below. Now to get our knowledge as perfect as we can before getting rid of the self-element up and down, we have to take as central cubes in our mind different sets again and again, until there are none which are primary to us. Then there remains only the distinction of some being above others. Now this can only be made to sink out of the primary place in our thoughts by reversing the relation. If we turned the block upside down and learned it in this new position, then we should learn the position of the cubes with regard to each other with that element in them, which comes from the action of gravity, reversed. And the true nature of the arrangement to which we added something in virtue of our sensation of up and down would become purer and more isolated in our minds. We have, however, supposed that the cubes are fixed. Then, in order to learn them, we must put up another block showing what they would be like in the supposed new position. We then take a set of cubes, models of the original cubes, and by consideration we can put them in such positions as to be an exact model of what the block of cubes would be if turned upside down. And here is the whole point on which the process depends. We can tell where each cube would come, but we do not know the block in this new position. I draw a distinction between the two X, to tell where it would be, and to know. Telling where it would be is the preparation for knowing. The power of assigning the positions may be called the theory of the block. The actual knowledge is got by carrying out the theory practically, by putting up the blocks and becoming able to realize without effort where each one is. It is not enough to put up the model blocks in the reverse position. It is found that this up and down is a very obstinate element indeed, and a good deal of work is requisite to get rid of it completely. But when it is got rid of in one set of cubes, the faculty is formed of appreciating shape independently of the particular parts which are above or below on first examination. We discover in our own minds the faculty of appreciating the facts of position independent of gravity and its influence on us. I have found a very great difference in different minds in this respect. To some it is easy, to some it is hard. And to use our old instance, the discovery of this capacity is like the discovery of a love of justice in the being who has forced himself to act justly. It is a capacity for being able to take a view independent of the conditions under which he is placed, and to feel in accordance with that view. There is, so far as I know, no means of arriving immediately at this impartial appreciation of shape. It can only be done by, as it were, extending our own body so as to include certain cubes, and appreciating then the relation of the other cubes to those. And after this, by identifying ourselves with other cubes, and in turn appreciating the relation of the other cubes to these. And the practical putting up of the cubes is the way in which this power is gained. It springs up with a repetition of the mechanical acts. Thus there are three processes, ist. An apprehension of what the position of the cubes would be. Second, an actual putting of them up in accordance with that apprehension. 5rd, the springing up in the mind of a direct feeling of what the block is, independent of any particular presentation. Thus the self-element of up and down can be got rid of out of a block of cubes. And when even a little block is known like this, the mind has gained a great deal. Yet in the apprehension and knowledge of the block of cubes with the up and down relation in them, there is more than in the absolute apprehension of them. for there is the apprehension of their position and also of the effect of gravity on them in their position. Imagine ourselves to be translated suddenly to another part of the universe, and to find there intelligent beings, and to hold conversation with them. If we told them that we came from a world, and were to describe the sun to them, saying that it was a bright, hot body which moved round us, they would reply, "You have told us something about the sun, but you have also told us something about yourselves." Thus in the apprehension of the sun as a body moving round us there is more than in the apprehension of it as not moving round, for we really in this case apprehend two things, the sun and our own conditions. But for the purpose of further knowledge it is most important that the more abstract knowledge should be acquired. The self-element introduced by the motion of the earth must be got rid of before the true relations of the solar system can be made out. And in our block of cubes, it will be found that feelings about arrangement and knowledge of space, which are quite unattainable with our ordinary view of position, become simple and clear when this discipline has been gone through. And there can be no possible mental harm in going through this bit of training, for all that it comes to is looking at a real thing as it actually is, turning it round and over and learning it from every point of view.